tell me about this trial that you guys are doing at Ohio State.
On a number of therapeutic trials, both on the inpatient side to provide new treatment modalities. So as you know, there are no approved treatments currently for COVID-19 since it's a new virus. But there has been the development of new antiviral medications and medications to treat the complications has moved at an incredible pace. And so now there is now a whole class of new antiviral medications that have a lot of promise. And specifically in this case, we're talking about a neutralizing antibody. So in fact, as you know, when we have a viral infection, our own bodies develop antibodies to the virus. And what they did in this case is they actually took antibodies from a person in the US who had infection early on in the pandemic. They identified multiple antibodies that were produced. They tested them for potency. And then they're able to actually take the gene to make that antibody, and then they can clone that and make synthetic versions of this antibody. So they can actually produce it in large quantities. So they selected this neutralizing antibody that is very potent, and so that means that it can eliminate the virus very quickly. And now it's available for clinical trials. So they moved very quickly from a preclinical phase of evaluating the drug to an initial phase 1 study to evaluate safety in healthy participants and who received the drug just to make sure that there were no side effects and that it was safe to give to humans. And now we're moving on to the phase 2 trial. And in this case, what we're trying to determine is the appropriate dose of the medication, as well as to see how effective it is at clearing the virus and preventing people with COVID-19 from progressing to more severe disease. So as you know, the majority of people with COVID-19 have mild symptoms and are able to stay at home. So usually if somebody tests positive and they're doing okay, we tell them you should quarantine at home for 2 weeks to prevent transmitting the virus to others. But in the meantime, you just try to get through it. Some people will progress to more severe disease and will require hospitalization. So the whole idea here is to actually be able to provide treatment to those patients with mild disease who are at home so that we can prevent them from progressing to more severe disease. So it's very exciting, and we've been working with the manufacturer of this drug for the last month and a half, and to set up the trial. It's a multi-center trial, so it's being run at multiple centers throughout the United States. And we've been selected as one of the centers. And we are now ready to open and to start taking in participants. So patients who test positive, as long as they enroll in the study within 3 days of the test, the COVID-19 test, then they can participate. It's open to adults, so 18 and older, of course, because we always evaluate any of these therapeutic options in adults first before they're evaluated in children. But there's no upper limit on age. And patients must have at least one symptom. So whether it's fever, cough, gastrointestinal symptoms, so it really could be anything. Obviously not so severe that they require hospitalization. And in terms of exclusions, so pregnant women are excluded just because we don't know the effect of this antibody on pregnancy. So that is not something that is evaluated in the early studies, as well as women who are breastfeeding. So really, the majority of people who test positive for COVID-19 would qualify for this study. So it offers an option of a potentially very good treatment. It's an IV infusion. So patients come in to we bring them in to our clinical research center, and we do a series of assessments, and then they receive an IV infusion that over 1 hour, and then we observe them for another 2 hours just to make sure that they're doing okay. And then they get to go home, and then we follow them. And the way that we do the follow-up for their convenience and also to minimize the risk of exposing others to COVID-19, we actually send visiting nurses to the patient's home, and they will be doing the assessments at the patient's home at specific time points. And the evaluation goes all the way through 29 days. So it lasts for a month. So they'll be doing swabs, blood collection to see how the virus is coming down, and also to make sure that the patient is doing okay.
It does sound a little bit invasive with the IV treatment, especially for those who would be able to heal on their own, seemingly. Blood draws and a nurse coming into your home. But why would you encourage people to sign up for the trial? Because somebody who's afraid of needles and maybe doesn't like hospitals as much, I would be maybe a little apprehensive, but why would you encourage them to do it?
So currently, there are no treatment options for anybody with mild disease. So even if there is no oral option, there is really nothing to offer other than, you should be just taking some acetaminophen to deal with the fevers, or just dealing with the symptoms. But there is nothing to actually treat the infection. So in this case, it offers an option for treatment. It is a clinical trial, so it's being evaluated, and it's a randomized clinical trial, and it's placebo controlled. So what that means is the study is evaluating 3 different doses of the drug, and also so patients will be randomized to either one of those doses or placebo. So they have a 3 in 4 chance of getting active drug, but they wouldn't know what they're getting, and we wouldn't know either. This is called a double-blind study, which is the way that we set up trials so that there won't be any bias in interpreting the results. But it offers an option, again, for patients who are willing to do this. It's a single-time infusion, so the infusion only happens once. And then after that, it's just assessments that are done by the nurses who are, coming to the patient's home. It obviously is not for everybody. So,
is this a brand new drug, or is this something that has been used before, like remdesivir or the other drugs that we've seen being tried to treat COVID?
Right. So what's very exciting about this is that this is a monoclonal antibody that is targeting the spike protein on the surface of the virus. So it's very specific to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is why this holds so much promise. So we're not talking about a drug that has been repurposed to see if it works against this virus. In this case, the drug itself has been designed, to target the structure of this particular virus.
And how hopeful are you that this is going to help slow this pandemic, hopefully make it go away, like before we have a vaccine come out?
So there is a lot of hope for this, to the extent that there is a larger NIH trial that will be following this study, that will be evaluating the most promising options. And that trial is called the ACTIV-2 study. And it will be, so that's going to open later in the summer. And that trial will actually have this drug as one of the treatment options. It's actually the first treatment option that will be part of that trial. As other promising treatment options are available, then those will be added to that trial as well. So, and this is a massive effort that is being done by NIH in partnership with the pharmaceutical industry to then quickly evaluate these promising treatment options to then be able to provide them to patients. And it's also these monoclonal antibodies targeted specifically against the SARS-CoV-2 virus are being also evaluated on the inpatient side, as well as for prophylaxis. So for patients who are not, who may have been exposed to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but are not yet infected with it. So the hope is to actually be able to determine the efficacy of this drug in the entire spectrum of COVID-19.
So for the entire 29-day time period that you guys are following these patients, do they have to keep quarantining? Because I know the standard is 14 days, but you know, we've seen not many, but a few cases of people picking up COVID twice. So
Right.
would they have to stay in their home so they don't mess up the study essentially?
No, no. The recommendation for quarantine is still the same recommendation as what CDC recommends. So, you know, the recommendation from CDC is 2 weeks. And in fact, after 3 days without any symptoms, then, you know, somebody does not have to continue to quarantine. So they can continue to follow the CDC recommendations for quarantining.
I think that's helpful as far as getting people to participate in the trial, that you don't have to do that. So you said you're one of 3 institutions who are doing this. Who are the other 2, and why were you guys chosen?
So there actually will be multiple institutions throughout the U.S. So we were selected because we have the longstanding experience doing clinical trials. As you know, we've had an active clinical trials unit that has been doing research in HIV and hepatitis C and other conditions for over 30 years. So we have very experienced staff and investigators. And we are able to actually set everything up and run these studies safely. So that was one of the reasons why we were selected. There are other institutions. I believe currently the only other institution in the Midwest that is doing this trial is a hospital in Indianapolis. But I also believe that there will be another institution in Cleveland eventually. So there will be others that will come online, but in the region, we are the only one. So this is an option for patients living in the Franklin County area.
Now, so let's talk logistics. So you test positive for COVID, you get your results back. How do you become part of the study? Does your doctor have to refer you? Do you go to the Wexner website? How do you do this?
So there are a few different ways to do this. Patients who receive their results, then they can actually call. We have a number, either locally, or they can call the national number for the clinical trial. So the number that they can call locally for our research staff is 614-293-8112. There is also a website for the study. It's called joincovidstudy.com. Once they go in, they will see a series of trials that are there. This is the Blaze-1 trial. And as soon as they click on the link for the Blaze-1 trial, it will ask them for the zip code where they live. And then it will connect them with us, and it will have all our information to then be able to call us. Because it's a fairly short window, we are actually going to be checking and taking phone calls every day, including weekends. And then they will communicate directly with one of our research nurses or one of the investigators. Could be, for many of these, it will be myself. And then we will set up everything. They'll go through a series of questions to make sure that they qualify, and then we will schedule them to come in to our clinical research center.
And how many people do you need? Are we talking dozens, hundreds, thousands? How many do you need to have an accurate picture of whether this works or not?
So the overall study, the phase 2 trial, the Blaze 1 trial, is going to enroll 400 participants. And we are looking to enroll about up to 40 in that particular trial. And then that will be followed by that larger trial that I told you about, the Active 2 trial. And I think that's, I forget the number right now, but I think that's over 1,000 participants that would be part of that trial.
Okay, so if you want to be one of the 40, you got to sign up right now if you have yesterday tested positive for COVID.
Right. So for anybody who's interested, then as soon as they receive notification that they've tested positive, then they should call the number, and then we can give them more information, and then they can make a decision at that point. But don't wait too long after you know that you have a positive result, because of that short window of 3 days that we talked about.
And we got to talk about side effects. What could this, it is a trial. What could this potentially do to people? How confident are you that this is not going to make these people any more sick?
Right. So it's a fairly new drug. So what we know so far from that first study that was done to determine safety is that there were no major side effects that were identified. Whenever there is an IV medication, we worry about in an infusion site reactions. So that could be some redness at the site of the IV, swelling. And of course, we pay close attention to look for allergic reactions. So anybody could have an allergic reaction to any drug. So we pay close attention to anything like that. If anything like that were to happen, of course, then we would treat that immediately. And our study participants then will have access to the study doctors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that would allow us to make a very quick assessment and determine what, if anything, needs to be done.
And is there any compensation for participants?
Yes, participants will be compensated for their time, since it is a commitment of actually coming in the one time, and then also the time that they will be spending with the study nurses who come to the patient's home. So there will be compensation for participants.